To this now, the cross-examination of Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge has adjourned for today in his tribunal looking into sexual harassment claims by Secretary Andiswa Mengo. He again defended his phone chats with Mengo today, calling the flirtatious and sensual nature of the allegations as he sees them. Mbenenge also claiming, or should I say explaining, why he asked her to remove her jacket on one occasion.
In this interaction, where, as you can see, this person seems to be wearing a jacket, if I'm going to say to you, and I would like to appreciate your appearance, and I say, take off your jacket, this is the context. That was what I was saying.
Why would you ask her to take off the top part of her garment?
You can see she's wearing a garment there.
But why did you ask her to remove it?
No, because I just wanted to appreciate her appearance, because as far as I was concerned, the jacket was obstructive.
Of what?
Obstructive in the sense that it doesn't give me a full perspective and view of how she looked.
What did you want to see? What did you want to see more of how she looked?
I've explained it.
No, you haven't.
I'll repeat.
What? You said you wanted to see more. What more did you want to see?
If I stand up wearing a jacket, you may not see how I am structured because there's a jacket.
So you wanted to see her body?
I was not denuding her. I wanted to see how she is made up.
Let's stay with Mbenenge, who reminded the tribunal that the matter is not a moral one, but rather a legal one.
At some point, there may be disagreement because the question is posed from a moral perspective. At some point, it may not necessarily be the position, but I wish to remind you, the issue here is whether these chats were welcome or unwelcome.
I agree with you. That is what we are trying to establish.
So we now know that in terms of the law of South Africa, at the center of it is whether conduct is welcome or unwelcome in the context of sexual harassment. The standard is legal and objective, not based on private morality or religious codes. Whether a person believes in adultery, does not condone it, thinks it's sinful, or thinks their conduct was not adultery, is completely immaterial. Those are moral, theological concerns, not legal ones.
Well, let's stay with this story and speak to Judges Matter researcher and advocacy officer Dimakatso Nchodu, who this is about what the tribunal's terms of reference say. Dimakatso, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Let's deal with what the judge president is saying there under cross-examination, intense cross-examination, and that is that he felt it necessary today to remind the tribunal that this is not a moral but rather a legal matter. Why do you think that that is uppermost in his mind at a time like this?
Well, I think I'm not exactly sure as to why he thinks that it's a legal matter. However, it's definitely, in a sense, a moral matter. But I think that, okay, so the crux of the issue is that essentially when a judge is referred to the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, the question is, there's a complaint, but the question isn't 100% based on the nature of the complaint, but it's whether the judicial officer acted in a way that makes them guilty of gross misconduct. So the broader question is whether or not Judge President Mbenenge acted in a way that was fitting of a judicial officer. The sexual harassment allegation or the sexual harassment part of it is only half of the issue.
So let's remind ourselves what the terms of reference of this tribunal say exactly what is being investigated or at least being probed about Mbenenge's conduct here.
So when it comes to the Judicial Conduct Tribunal. Usually a complaint is lodged and it goes to the Judicial Conduct Tribunal by the Judicial Conduct Committee. If the judicial officer is seen as having committed either gross misconduct, is seen as highly incapacitated, or has acted unbefitting of a judicial officer to the point where they could be impeached. Then it goes to the Judicial Conduct Tribunal to assess whether there is enough evidence to show that there's a prima facie case against the judicial officer to show that they are unbefitting of judicial office and therefore should be removed from office, or a recommendation showing why they should be removed from office, and if there's enough information to justify that.
Yeah. All right. With that contribution, I'd like for us to take a listen for a moment to the chairperson of the tribunal, Judge Bernard Mwepe. And this is what he had to say in relation to exactly what you and I are discussing.
JP, you can rest assured that whatever people may think, whatever the court of public opinion may think, when a person is accused of sexual harassment, yes, in this tribunal, there's no point of departure which says the person is guilty. Yes. Because otherwise the proceedings would be a charade. Yes. Otherwise the outcome would have been determined already. Yes. And I can give you an assurance that irrespective of what the public opinion thinks about this case, yes, irrespective of what anybody may think about this case, yes, we are going, first let me say, we don't view you as being guilty already, as you worry. Irrespective of what the court of public opinion may think, irrespective of whosoever may think what, we are going to decide this case on the facts before us and in terms of the law, irrespective of who may think what. You can rest assured.
So let's come back to our discussion, Dimakatso, and it takes us back to my initial question as to why perhaps the judge president is apprehensive, I think is the appropriate word to use here, particularly about the line of questioning. Yesterday, he seemed particularly irritated by a question of fact, in fact, a statement of fact, and that is that he's a married man. And so what kind of relationship did he want to explore exactly with the complainant? And he completely dismisses that out of hand, saying that matters of his marriage are not under discussion here. What do we read into his state of mind about perhaps what even the public is thinking about him right now, or how the public looks at him right now?
So it's a bit difficult because as much as the judge president said what he said, matters of sexual harassment, as much as the broader complaint is about his conduct, matters of sexual harassment or sexual assault are personal in nature. So I think that in this case, the judge president could be mistaken in that sense, where he, I don't want to say he wants to evade questions on his marriage, but I think he is mistaken because at the end of the day, when we are dealing with consent and when we are dealing with assault, sexual harassment, or even power imbalances in the workplace and inappropriate behavior in the workplace, it will become of a personal nature.
Can the judge president survive this?
That's a very difficult question. I think that it's not a matter of whether he can survive this. I think we'll have to wait and see. But I do think that regardless of the outcome, it's definitely going to paint a certain picture of him and his reputation, as well as, unfortunately, the greater integrity of the judiciary. which is quite unfortunate. However, I suppose on the other hand, we also have the view that the judiciary is taking sexual harassment claims seriously. And I think that is a bit of a double-edged sword, where on one hand, we see in these proceedings that issues of consent and issues of power imbalance, as I mentioned, between somebody who is in the office of a judge president and somebody who is in a less senior position is something that definitely contributes to feelings of discomfort, and whether or not the person can say yes as a outright yes or no as an outright no. Yeah, so it opens up our thoughts or our minds into understanding consent.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that the judiciary is exploring that in this sense, and also showing the seriousness of workplace harassment. However, it is also unfortunate to show that no one is, even our courts, which handle sexual harassment cases, well, sexual assault cases, there are issues just like any other workplace in the judiciary, which we usually have faith in the sense of we have faith that they are completely objective as judges, and that these kind of issues do not happen.
Yeah, and I can't fault you on that one, because as we speak, the judiciary only now is discussing a sexual harassment policy within the judiciary. We've got to look at this, though, from both angles, Dimakatso, and that is that the complainant seemed to have played along. I think we've now had the benefit of listening at length on what either party did, and early hours of the morning, she sometimes would initiate the conversation. What does that tell us about whether or not she encouraged this?
Again, a very difficult question, because I don't want to be in a position where I speak for complainants or victims, or people who are not victims in a sense. But I think there is no such concept as the perfect victim. As I said, in a place with a lot of dynamics, and somebody who's in such an esteemed position as a judge president, it's very difficult for no to be no, as I said explicitly, and yes to be yes. I think, well, I'm very much looking forward to the outcome in terms of the report of the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, to see what would be the legal position in this sense. However, I think it's a very unclear question. I think that only the two people who are involved in the matter could fully answer that question, because we only know the evidence that has been adduced to the public and not that evidence that is in camera. And we also only know based on WhatsApp messages that are available, because we also know that there were WhatsApp messages that were deleted. So already the information before us is compromised. So as I said, apart from those two people who are involved in the matter, they would know.
Whatever the outcome, final question, whatever the outcome here, at the end of the day, members of the public are going to look at the judiciary with an even more curious eye. This is my injection of editorializing here. We have seen judges being impeached, and here is a judge facing a judicial conduct tribunal. What do we walk away with as members of the public in terms of the confidence in the judiciary, with the view that perhaps we held previously that judges perhaps are infallible? Is this proof that they ordinary human beings like you and me?
Yeah, so I think, as I said, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think in a sense where it will, members of the public will deplatform judges and see them as human beings and political animals who have biases, who live daily lives and are also capable of things such as sexual harassment or any other misconduct. As seen from the other impeachments of Judge President Hlophe, or former Judge President Hlophe, and Judge Mutata, we can see that in different ways, the judiciary is holding judges accountable. And I think having the portions of the conduct tribunal or the hearing public should reinforce a sense of justice and also transparency and accountability within the judiciary, and show that the judiciary is not an untouchable, figment of our imaginations or this broad heavenly kind of structure. It's a institution, it's a state institution, it's an arm of government, and it is accountable to the public at the end of the day. And I think showing that judges can be held accountable in a public platform should, if anything, reinforce faith in the judiciary.
Interesting indeed. Thank you very much for your contribution to this discussion. Dimakatso Nchodu is with the Judges Matter organization, a researcher and advocacy officer within